Hi guys, so we're the Floc app team and we're creating a web application for plant operators so that they can check the size of the flocks. And this data will be used to determine if more or less coagulant should be used. So Floc app is aiming to expedite the feedback cycle on the coagulation process. And to do this, we're creating a web application that will size the flocks. Using this data, the coagulation teams will have more accurate data within a faster time frame that they can use to adjust the coagulant levels. And ultimately, the solution will save time and cost for the plants. This web application will also work offline so that the plant operators can access the web applications even if Wi-Fi isn't available. And in the past, the Flock app subteam has worked to write scripts that are capable of processing images that are taken by a microscopic camera. And this is done using machine vision techniques. The scripts are capable of analyzing an image and detecting individual flocks before grouping closely located flocks together and counting them as a single larger flock. The images are passed through a black and white filter in order to more easily detect the flocks within them. And previous image analysis is shown like in the appendix. And in addition, the team has built the skeleton of a graphical user interface or a GUI, which displays all of the necessary buttons for the user. And we will be working on adding functionality to those buttons. And in order to build this app, we need to use many different tools. First off, we are programming the app using Python, which is an interpreted high-level programming language that's known for its code readability, and it's an integral part for debugging too. And so we use PyCharm as our integrated development environment as it works particularly well with Python. And we're also using GitHub to facilitate version control and ensure that we can all work on the code together. And OpenCV is a library of programming functions with real-time computer vision capabilities, which are necessary for real-time image processing. And finally, we're using SQLite, a database management system to store data gathered from the size and count scripts.
All right, so a little about the method and process for the sub team. We start out with each member doing a couple of tricky installs and reading some onboarding documents. And then we move on to looking at code from previous years. And then we learn the appropriate skills needed so we can write new code that improves on and builds off the previous elements of the code that Rishi talked about. And then the way that our app works is we have three components. We have a script, a Python script that analyzes the flock sizes from an image. And then we have a front end web app that has the user controls and all the buttons to control how the image works. And then we have a backend database and SQLite. And the way it works is the front end web app will start taking photos and we'll send those photos to a script. And that script will store the data into the back end. And then the front end will load the data from the back end and display that back to the user. So this semester, we've been working a lot on improving the edge detection, which is for the Floc app script. And previously, we have done thresholding for each pixel to see whether it is above or below a certain brightness level. And then we count the size of all the pixels that are above a certain brightness and that are grouped together in an island. But this semester, we're working with canny edge detection, which focuses on the gradient of the image. And that when the gradient, which is basically the derivative, is highest, that is where the edge of the flock should be. And then it uses non-maximum suppression to get a very thin edge. So it only gets one kind of pixel value for each spot along the edge. And then after that, it does hysteresis thresholding, which is two levels of thresholds. There's a low and a high threshold, and every pixel above the high threshold is automatically part of the edge. And then every pixel that meets the low threshold will only be part of the edge if it is neighboring a high threshold pixel, which takes care of some of the noise issues. And then here's a look at our front end web app. There's a red button to start taking photos on a timer, and then the stop button next to it will stop. And then we have an export button that will convert the SQLite database into a CSV file. And then there's a button to trigger the graphing, which I think we talked about after this. And here is a quick video demo of the images being taken on a timer. Currently, it's just using the camera webcam, but that will be connected to a microscopic timer or microscopic camera.
So as Luke just mentioned, there is a data analysis aspect of the app. And the goal is to be able to click a button on the front end part of the application and to produce this graph, such as the one shown here. While this graph is just sample data, we ran our program on one of the FaceTime images. So it's not real flocks. It's just a demonstration of how the actual data would look on a graph. So it would show the total area of the flocks captured in the image. So basically, we would run our edge detection algorithm on the image and count the different flock sizes and then sum the areas of the different flocks. And then it'll compare those over time. A new addition to our program was that we now store the time of the pictures in our backend database. So all of this data comes from the backend, which I'm going to talk about on the next slide, and it can be easily accessed from the front end. So I guess some of the most important goals of this data analysis are to add simplicity to the app. So it's very easy for plant operators to just look and be able to visually see what the flock sizes are in the water, so they can detect whether they're too small or too large, and to assess the level of coagulant needed to add. It's also adaptable. It can be easily modified if needed, and of course, it's relevant because this is what we're trying to figure out as a subteam. So for our backend database, as Arushi mentioned earlier, we use SQLite. We use this to save the records of our flocks, manage the large data, and it just makes the process of storing flocks, like the flock sizes, a lot easier. So when we upload to the database, each flock is assigned a unique ID. It's also the time the picture was taken is measured. And essentially this creates a user interface that allows us to easily be able to look at when the stuff was taken and easily access it in the front end. Something that's really nice about SQLite is we're able to access the data offline. So when there's no Wi-Fi, it'll be very easy for plant operators to use the backend and be able to run our front end application and easily get the data from the backend when they're needed. And currently, the way this happens is the data is uploaded to the database synchronously when the code runs, and each time the code is run to take a picture of with the camera, this whole process occurs and the image is uploaded to the database. So some future tasks of our subteam. So first off, we really do want to improve this flock detection algorithm more. And to do so, well, we currently want to work on improving our current implementation of the canny edge detection algorithm. We also want to possibly research other algorithms that may be more relevant to our situation, because I know canny edge detection is very relevant for when images are constantly changing, but since we have a pretty set type of image, we might be able to get an algorithm that works a little better with it. And then with canny edge, a big goal of our sub-team is to optimize the thresholding. There are two pictures shown here. One was the initial image, and we actually took this from the thesis. And then I put in an image that is an example of poor thresholding. It's very specific. As you can see in the top left corner, it's very, it grabs a lot of stuff. So obviously it wasn't filtered well. And then there's also poor thresholding and overfitting, which is a big issue, which I will talk about in 1 second. Another thing is next semester we're going to be in the lab, so we want to calibrate the camera and get it working, so we don't have to use like the FaceTime image cameras from there. And we have a working camera and code to run the camera, so now we just need to put that all together, and then we'll be doing that. And with the camera working, we want to take the process of bottom-up testing. So we essentially want to start by taking pictures of still water and running tests with our manufacturer. Like we want to create an environment where we can take where we know what's going on in the water, so still water, and we want to use the camera to take images of that, and we want to run our code on that, so we can have kind of a base case and like a minimal viable product, so we know what's working. So then we can start specifying after that, because our current implementation focuses on images taken with movement. So there's blur, there's depth, a lot of things we can't control. And we are worried that we're overfitting our data. So we want to start from kind of the base case and work our way up to double check that everything's working properly. And of course, our long-term goal remains the same. We want to create an app that uses the Floc side data to provide coagulant level recommendations. So that's our long-term goal. That's in the back of our head every time we make changes to the algorithm. And that's the goal of our team. So I know we can't do any live questions, but if any of you have any questions or recommendations, we greatly accepted. We have all our emails here, so please like email us or Slack us. Thank you. And we have an appendix slide after this.